worldwide fans of the planet's hottest entertainment with an edge. I'm Jaime En Fuego, and so stoked to have you joining me here for another installment of Enfuegotainment. That's right, my namesake program. You can just call me Fuego for short. And yes, it's another kind of Fresca Fuego review. This has only been in theaters for a couple weeks now, and I've been rocking for stuff that we don't get horror press for. If I'm just, going to see a comedy or action movie or whatever, I've been doing this this like AMC Stubbsy thing where they hit me with 3 movies a week, and I'm like, okay, what else that I was kind of on the fence about seeing am I gonna go check out today? And I went to see Fighting with My Family. Yes, this is a World Wrestling Entertainment, and I've still never gotten used to calling them WWE. This is WWF, all growing up for me, and I was so just captivated by the likes of Hulk Hogan and Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels and DX and, and then later on, The Rock and just various others. I first discovered wrestling in the late 80s and early 90s, but I finally got cable when I was 16, when the Attitude Era was really starting to kick off. And so that's where my adoration and affinity for this sports entertainment, as they eventually started to call it, basically came about. And I will definitely admit I watched just religiously for years and years and years, but it was when they started giving a push to the likes of John Cena and so many of the guys that I was a big fan of. When we were starting to see like the death of DX, and there was no more of the big, insanely violent TLC matches with like the Dudley Boys and Edge and Christian and Hardys and stuff like that. I mean, I was honestly bigger than anything into ECW, and I really felt like when they were purchased, Heyman, selling to McMahon, and then, the McMahons buying WCW, and it just all being condensed into one product, I felt like they lost just some of their creativity, and it just wasn't as interesting to me. But bottom line, even though I haven't watched for years, I still have that special place in my heart for wrestling, professional wrestling, and all of its silly antics and stuff like that. And so yeah, this is a World Wrestling Studios film, which it's a biopic based on true events, true life story and all that, about this little goth girl from the UK named Paige, who helped to revolutionize the women's take on this sort of sports entertainment and everything. And I mean, we had the Trish Stratuses, and we had the Sables, and we had people like that, and the Chynas, obviously. Rest peacefully, you crazy chica. But even so, the Divas division was still never really looked at, even as it was growing into something during the tail end of the Attitude Era, as it just really wasn't respected. It was sexualized in a crazy fashion, obviously, and it was just more about tits and ass as opposed to like actual good in-ring talent and stuff. And that's something that Paige, and then even now with like crazy ladies like Rousey coming from the UFC over into the women's division is more than ever about actual wrestling, as opposed to just a pretty face and all that other stuff. And so Paige was definitely helpful with that, and the fact that she was so well trained from this family of wrestlers, and a brother who did it, and parents that did it. And so this was one that was on my radar, but it was never like something I was going to rush out and see. So here on Enfuegotainment, I always cover a little bit of Bueno, Malo, and Feo. And I gotta say, this movie, I heard good buzz about it after it finally came out. People were like, yeah, it's a lot better than you would necessarily think. And from the trailers, I was intrigued enough, but damn am I glad that I took the time to go and watch this. And one of the biggest buenos, if I'm going to start with the good, is the fact that the cast is ridiculous. I mean, you've got this Florence Pugh, man, I feel terrible because it's P-U-G-H, I believe, and she plays, Paige, the lead character, and she does a terrific job. But so many of the supporting faces around, first and foremost, he only appears in a couple scenes in the movie with Stephen Merchant, who really made a name for himself, like writing and directing and starring in various different stuff on like British TV, like Extras and The Office, and he was, but he's jumped over into America, and he's done, like he was in Logan, and he actually directs this movie, and he's in a couple scenes as well as the father of the father of the girlfriend of Paige's brother. So yeah, small role, but he's got a couple amusing scenes and stuff. And besides his presence in there, Nick Frost, who's, he's from Spaced, and he was in like Shaun of the Dead, and he's been in enough American stuff, but I mean, he's really known more so than anything else for, Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead, and working with Simon and all that stuff. So Mr. Peg. And so there's also, boy, I believe she plays Cersei on Game of Thrones. It's like Lena Headey or something. She's in this, and then you've got The Rock in it, and then you've got Vince Vaughn playing this like talent developer guy in the farm system of the NXT. He doesn't pop up until the second half of the movie once Paige actually gets into the developmental farm system and stuff, and he's great. The one thing that Vince Vaughn always brings is, he can be funny, but he can really do a killer job of this like stern but loving and snarky, and he does have dramatic chops, and I've known, even stretching all the way back to Swingers, I've always loved Vince Vaughn, and it's weird how at various parts of his career he's been typecast as one thing, like when he did the Psycho remake and then he was in Clay Pigeons and everything, and people are like, oh, he's just going to play Psycho killers, and then he was able to shift back into comedy, but then he's been pigeonholed with just comedy, and he can do drama, and he brings some legit weight to a few of his scenes with Florence, who plays Paige, and I mean the whole family is great. All the supporting players are good, and this movie has genuine heart. It's silly at times, but it does a terrific job of just getting across the true, genuine love through this family. And it is, even though it's Paige's story, it's also just as much a story about her brother Zach and the fact that it was his dream too, and he, as the older brother, helping train her and all this other stuff, and they try out together, and he doesn't end up making it. She's the only one that they take, and so he has to go back to the reality of the fact that they're just small time, just doing these very small little venues, and yet he's beating his body up. And there's one scene in particular where Vince Vaughn just gives a very harsh assessment of Paige's brother, and he does not discredit the extent of work that he's put into the craft, but he does basically describe him as a jobber and one that would never really get over with the crowd, and so he would essentially just end up taking tons of bumps, putting other guys over, and it just, he would never be able to ascend to that level, whether as a face or as a heel, presumably. And so it's a greatly dramatic scene, but it's also a very harshly just assessment, and it's a harsh assessment of just anything that you are putting your ass into that you don't see just the extent of results that you would like. And yeah, man, it's tough, and that would actually probably be like a Feo scene, but that's sort of good ugly. Bad here, it's honestly, it's not as funny as I thought it was going to be. I thought that there would be more like absolute laugh out loud stuff, and there's a few bits here and there, but I think maybe I was led through the burden of expectation to think that I was going to laugh more than I did in this, but it actually just held more dramatic weight, and that is a bueno thing. That is a good thing. Other bad stuff, other MALO things. It is a little on the safe side. It really just it portrays everything. It's PG-13. This is nothing like I don't know, The Wrestler with Mickey Rourke, that really looks at just the rough side of sports entertainment and the darker underbelly of it. And Bad, it does show just how cliquey some of the girls are, but I do feel like it does kind of make Paige a little stereotypical a little bit at times. And she was just on Collider Live talking about the film, Paige herself, and so she was talking about various behind the scenes things, and first breaking into the industry and everything. And also another MALO thing, I guess, is that I know she put in all of that work, but she did kind of have it easy once she finally got there. I mean, youngest women's champion ever, and just not really having to pay as many dues in the NXT and just getting thrown right into it. But then again, she came from a pedigree, and despite coming from that, she put in all of her work and stuff, I guess, and paid all those dues earlier in life, having just been born into it, so to speak. So I guess that's not really necessarily bad. Maybe that's just more Feo, and it's other ugly. I mean, I guess it's rough seeing just how tough the industry can be, and I would imagine with women especially, like with women being so much clickier at times, and you learn all about that in psychology class, where it's like you put a bunch of guys into a room, eventually most will end up growing up and whatever, unless there's like alcohol involved, and then they all start beating the shit out of each other. But women always faction off and pick each other apart, and it can be very just underhanded and just vicious with each other, and just really petty at times too. But I guess men can also be that. But the real ugly that I can attest to here is the fact that just the amount of pain that Paige, like the real Paige, put her body through and stuff like that. She had a career-ending injury, and there is wonder if she was going to pull like a Daniel Bryan and actually be able to return. And I mean, the same thing happened with HBK, one of my absolute favorites. They said that he wasn't going to be able to return, but he was so banged up from doing these big Hell in a Cells with Taker and things like that. But he did eventually come back, and he did have another run with DX and Triple H and stuff. And so, it took all of those years, especially doing it at a young level. They talk about how these football players who started at a very young age doing Pop Warner and stuff, a lot of the time they can have these head injuries and these sort of lingering things that your body gets so brittle at such a young age. And I would imagine it's great that Paige is still able to be working behind the scenes with World Wrestling Entertainment, and she can have an on-camera role, but she can't have an in-ring role. And that's really, it's sad to think about that, that she obviously solidified, even more so with this biopic being made with this film. Just her legacy has been solidified, and she accomplished an immense amount of awesome things in a short period of time. But the ugly here is just the reality of putting your body through this sort of just constant abuse and the toll that it can take, especially in a short period in the spotlight and actually performing in ring. And so that's definitely ugly, and it's a reality of the business, and that's the case with any sort of violent sport or sports entertainment in this case, whether it's professional football or professional wrestling. So I guess here at the end, I will definitely give this a 3 out of 5 Fuego Fireballs. Yep, so this is definitely a bueno movie. And the cool thing is that I don't necessarily think that, but with just the sensibility that Stephen Merchant as the director brings to the festivities here, you don't have to be a diehard wrestling fan, or even in a lot of ways a casual wrestling fan, to not get something out of this film. I think that you can just be a fan of sports films. You can be a fan of just comedies and still find enjoyment here. So I am obviously not of those little sub-levels. I was a big wrestling fan for many years, and I still find this stuff very entertaining the few times that I've just come across it and watched a little bit of it. And yeah, it's still pretty badass. And I'm very curious what's going to happen when Cody Rhodes gets this new upstart competing program together. Maybe it will elevate the level of sports entertainment to the heights that I personally saw it take in the late 90s and early 2000s. But yes, Fighting with My Family, it is a bueno film. That is right. It's not quite Fuego, it's not 4, and it's not In Fuego, it's not 5, but it's good, and I trust that hey, wrestling fan or not, you can have a ton of fun with this particular film. So I've been Jaime En Fuego, and you can find me on all social media sectors like Twitter and Instagram, Facebook, and obviously here on YouTube. Do that like thing, that share thing, that subscribe thing, and hit the bell to get notifications about any time I do at least one review a week, and I'm planning on adding some additional content, probably with a Patreon at some particular point. So people who know me from perhaps the other show that I do called The Horror Show, which is at youtube.com/The Horror Show channel, where I do a weekly, couple times a week show called Hail to Stephen King. A lot of peeps know me from that. And also just our channel as a whole, we do a couple videos a day, every single day. Horror film reviews, trailer reactions, convention coverage, all kinds of cool things. But here on my personal channel, I cover everything else. I'm doing all of the Star Wars films in timeline order leading up to the December release of Episode 9. So far this year, I have already done in January the Phantom Menace, and in February I did Attack of the Clones, and I'm going to be, delving into the Clone Wars and some of the spin-off films and the rest of the saga proper. I also did reviews for all 8 of the Best Picture nominations this past year for the Oscars. So lots of coolness that you can check out in my renewed coverage here. And so I extend a grande gracias for anybody who has stumbled upon this video. If you've not seen me before, it is greatly appreciated having your presence here. And yeah, y'all, until the film reel of Ka comes around once more, I say hasta luego, Cinemigos, but I am hopeful that we get to reconnect sooner rather than later. And until then, laters.